everyone. It's really nice to welcome you to this online talk today. My name is Julie Ellis. I'm a senior lecturer in the Sociology of Health and Illness here at the University of Sheffield. And I'm going to be doing about 30-minute talk all about the sociology of the unborn and asking the question, when does a person become a person? So just a little bit more about me before I start then. I'm a teacher in the sociology team, so I teach undergraduate and postgraduate students as well, and I'm also an active researcher. My research interests are in medical sociology broadly, but particularly looking at issues to do with death, dying and bereavement. And I'm a sociologist by training, so yeah, all my education has been in sociology. So I'm very much an advocate of the discipline, and I like to be able to talk to students, particularly students who are studying further education and maybe thinking about doing sociology for a degree course. Okay, so just a little word, obviously, on the sensitivity of the topic. I'm, very grateful that you are wanting to join today, engage and think about a topic that is quite emotionally challenging. I will be offering like a slide at the end of the session where I signpost people to different support charities that are available for people who are experiencing issues related to pregnancy and baby loss. So that will appear at the end of the presentation and the talk. So I'll crack on with what it is that I want to do today. So essentially I want to cover three main areas as part of this talk. So I'm going to start by just giving you some of the kind of the basics and general overview of what we mean when we talk about baby loss or reproductive loss and some of the different experiences that phrase is referring to. And then I'm just going to talk a little bit about Baby Loss Awareness Week, which is part of the reason why I wanted to do this talk today, to coincide with this event that is happening and is quite a big deal in the baby loss community, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a few moments' time. And then I'm going to move on and start thinking more specifically about the input of sociology, sociological thinking, and how we can understand unborn babies in very social terms as social objects who live within social worlds. And in particular, I'm going to be thinking about the issue of identity, something that in the sociological literature is referred to sometimes as personhood. So how is it that we create a personhood and an identity for babies before they are born? And then finally, I'm going to reflect on some of this and the importance of this thinking for understanding events like Baby Loss Awareness Week and how issues of personhood intersect with aspects of memory and memory making that bereaved parents are often involved in practices related to remembering their child. So trying to join up some of those concepts with what we see happening in society today in terms of events like Baby Loss Awareness Week. So I'll make a start then, and the first thing, as I say, I would like to do is just to kind of clarify what I mean by baby loss, or specifically some of the terms that are used in the literature is reproductive loss, and this actually covers quite a diverse range of experiences. So we might be talking about early or late miscarriages. So miscarriages is the loss of a pregnancy before 24 weeks of gestation. So an early one would be within the first 12 weeks, and then a later miscarriage between 12 and 24 weeks. A loss that occurs after 24 weeks is referred to as a stillbirth. And the 24 weeks is quite significant because in terms of sort of a state response or kind of a formalizing of that life. If you have a loss before 24 weeks, you don't need to get a death certificate. There's no kind of official record that baby, that life existed and happened. And post 24 weeks you do, and there's certain requirements around burials and funeral arrangements, but before 24 weeks there's not really anything formal in place in terms of recognition. So we've talked about miscarriage, stillbirth. It also includes perinatal and infant death. So that perinatal basically refers to the period of pregnancy, but also the following 12 months after the birth of a child. And infant death is obviously thinking about children when they're a little bit older, but still quite small. So into the age of kind of between 1 and 2 years. And we've also included termination of pregnancy within this kind of banner of experiences as well. As you, I'm sure, are aware, some people have a termination of pregnancy for what the medical profession calls social reasons. So this might be a woman's right to decide that the pregnancy is not the right time for her, or the pregnancy for whatever reason is not wanted. And as long as that's before 24 weeks, you can usually access an abortion in the UK context anyway. In England particularly. In terms of termination of pregnancy, that can also refer to people who make the decision to end a pregnancy based on information they may have received from medics about the developing fetus or the baby. Fetus is a word for the growing baby, and that might be that it has some kind of genetic condition or some sort of disability that is going to affect its quality of life, sometimes quite profoundly, and people might make decisions to end the pregnancy that is otherwise a wanted pregnancy, but for those reasons. Okay, so I hope that kind of context is helpful. Just thinking about the extent of this then and who it might affect. There's estimates that around 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience pregnancy or baby loss. And so this is quite a common experience, really. And if we think about that in a daily sense, it's estimated that every day in the UK, around 13 babies will die before the end of pregnancy, during birth, or very soon after birth has happened. So that's 13 a day, 13 families affected. And then in 2021, there were estimates of around 500 babies maybe lost to miscarriage each day. And obviously, because miscarriage can happen quite early on in a pregnancy, sometimes women don't even know that they've had a miscarriage, so that figure could actually be even higher. So the bottom line is that this is actually a very common experience, and I imagine that most people listening to this will know somebody that's been affected by this, if they haven't been affected directly themselves. But it may be the fact that you're not aware of who in your social network has experienced this kind of loss. And that's because, as we see evidenced in quite a bit of the literature, that baby loss is a taboo subject, and it's often a quite hidden loss. And so this relates to a concept that a psychiatrist, a psychologist, Ken Doka, wrote about in the late 1980s, and this is something called disenfranchised grief. And this is where society does not necessarily recognise a particular kind of loss and consider it legitimate. And so that can be for a variety of reasons. If you think about things like the death of a pet or the death of a celebrity who you might feel is particularly significant to you, these types of losses tend to be considered less emotionally impactful and challenging as, say, losing a parent or losing a sibling. So the idea of disenfranchised grief gets at this idea that not all grief is societally equal, if you like. There's a hierarchy of grief, and it's considered that some relationships are more important and that are going to impact a bereaved person more than others. And the issue with baby loss, and particularly early miscarriages, is that quite often nobody else other than the parents may even know that this life existed. And so there is an argument that sometimes this grief is quite disenfranchised, in the sense that society doesn't necessarily recognise the emotional impact of that loss. And there's some arguments about the extent to which the baby was a person anyway, and that's something that we're going to come on to and talk about in a few moments' time. Okay, so just to go back to the awareness week then, and just to give you a bit of context about that, as I say, it's happening now. It's part of the reason why I wanted to do this talk. And in the UK, it's actually in its 21st year this year. And the main aim of the awareness week is obviously, other than to raise awareness about these experiences that otherwise can be quite hidden, is an opportunity to remember those lives that have been lost, and those babies that were never born, that didn't get to grow into children, adults, etc. And so various different things happen as part of the Awareness Week. People attend different virtual and in-person events such as memorial services, and people often choose to support or donate money to baby loss charities at this time, often in memory of their child that they have lost. Social media plays an important role in kind of spreading news about the Awareness Week, but also connecting people with lived experience of loss. And providing kind of support. And a good example of this is the wave of light, which is the kind of a ritual act that signifies the end of the Baby Loss Awareness Week. So this week it's going to be on Sunday, on the 15th of October. And the idea is that at 7 p.m, people who are affected by loss light a candle and take a few moments to reflect and to remember. And we create essentially a wave of light. People often take pictures of their candles and upload them to social media using this hashtag wave of light. And so there's some key elements of the Awareness Week, but what it also does is it creates a space that might not readily exist for bereaved parents to be able to talk about their child, to say their name, if you like. And we know this from research that I've been involved in previously, talking to bereaved parents, that there isn't always what feels like a legitimate or an appropriate time to talk about your dead child, or your pregnancy that never ended in a life in the way that we conventionally understand it. And so being able to talk about their baby and say their name is often a very powerful thing. And as part of the Baby Loss Awareness Week, people who have had these experiences share their stories. And I've picked one story in particular that I want to talk to you a little bit about as part of this talk, because I think it connects to some of the more sociological things that I want to say in a few moments' time. And this is Katie's story, and you can read this and other stories if you look on the Baby Loss Awareness website. So Google babylossawareness.org, and you'll find lots of different stories on there. But this is Katie's story, and I'm just going to read you a few lines from this. So, Althea was a much longed for baby, one we had tried several years for. Finding out we were to welcome a baby in the summer of 2020 changed everything for us, and we were completely ready for this little one to come in and be the focus of all our attention. Those months during lockdown planning how we were going to raise her were the best months of my life. When I gave my final push in the early hours of 24th of June at home in a birth pool, I remember thinking life is about to change forever, and little did I know how true that would be. Thea was a happy, strong and inquisitive baby, even at an hour old. Watching her and her daddy bond over the next few hours are a memory I'll cherish for the rest of my life, and one that makes me tear up every time I think about it. The following morning, Althea passed away at home. We don't know why, it was completely unexpected. The worst thing is, we may never find out why. We are grieving not only for our daughter, but for the life that we had planned. And as I particularly wanted to share Katie's story, because she makes reference in there to a life that she was planning for, a bonding process with her baby that began long before it was born. And that suggests, I think, that this baby had a social life of its own. And if we think about some of the things that Katie might have been doing in this planning process, in this preparing for, on what these activities might be, and a classic one is having the baby scan, so the 12-week and 20-week scan that most women will have as part of their pregnancy journey. Where the medical team will check that everything is developing okay with your growing baby. And often you get a picture from that scan, and you'll have seen these, I'm sure, where people may upload them to social media to announce their pregnancy to their wider social network. They may frame them and have them in their homes. They're quite important, significant ways of connecting with your child very early on in its development process. They may find out what sex the child is that they're having, and so they can start thinking in societally kind of normative ways, maybe about what it means to have a boy or what it means to have a girl, but the idea being that it gets you closer to understanding who they are or who they might be, so getting to bond with them, to know them. Buying gifts for the baby, buying items for their nursery, receiving gifts from others, such as a baby shower, things that are for this baby, for this person that is developing. maybe naming the child, imagining things like its first day at school, talking to it, playing music during the pregnancy. So Katie may have been doing some or, many of these different examples that I've listed here. And what these activities while they might seem to be quite personal, and maybe even individual in some circumstances, we can look at these with a more sociological lens and see that they reflect to some extent social values that are important within that particular cultural context. So, the impact of consumerism maybe and buying goods and things for the baby, and having the kind of material items around that are part of that, preparing for a baby process. The assumptions about gender that might come from finding out what sex your baby is and having something like a gender reveal party, reflecting the dominant ways in which we think about the sexes in our society, I guess is reflected in the importance for many people of finding out, whether they're having a girl or a boy. And there's norms around things like gift giving as well, that they are a way of tying people who are further in the social network, not the parents, but more on the outer of the child's social network, connecting then to them and kind of making that social connection. And so Linda Lane, who is an anthropologist who did a hell of a lot of work in this area in the 2000s and kind of really shaped the field of social studies in related to miscarriage and baby loss. She wrote the following statement in her book, which I think is really interesting. She said that through the buying, giving, and arranging of things, American middle-class women and their social networks begin to actively construct babies to be as real, that is, as individuals who count in society before they are born. And this is partly why sociologists like Deborah Lupton have argued that an unborn baby is actually a social object. It has an impact in the world. It has agency that shapes people's actions and the way people think, even before it's physically present in the world, in a sort of very a tangible sense. And so what this also does, and I think Lupton recognises this in her idea that unborns are social objects, is that, what we're dealing with here is potentially culturally and socially situated ideas about when life actually begins, when a person is a person. And this uncertainty about, what we deem to be the start of life raises important questions about human identity and, at what point we would consider a developing fetus or baby, depending on what terminology you prefer to use, when they become a person. So a fetus is just a way to describe the developing baby inside its mother's womb. And so sociologists were exploring, interested in exploring experiences of pregnancy loss and early life loss, have used a concept in particular that's related to identity to help us understand what might be going on here. And that concept is called fetal personhood. And just to say a little bit more about that then, it's a concept used to describe the attribution of an identity and particular characteristics of humanness to unborn babies. And so we might do this by doing some of the kind of sort of practices that and the activities that we identified in Katie's case in terms of preparing for her baby. That is part of the personalising, creating a person process. Another context in which fetal personhood has emerged and been quite a useful idea is within debates surrounding the somewhat, ethically challenging issue of abortion. And the position of people who are pro-abortion, pro right to life, and therefore anti women's choice in sense of being able to have an abortion if that's what they wish to do. And so, whilst feminists have kind of they've been interested in this concept quite a lot because it does border on and has implications for those issues around abortion. So the idea that a fetus is a person, and this can be happening very early on, is clearly quite an emotive idea that some within the pro-life movement will use and harness as a means to kind of promote their ideas about what is correct, and that abortion shouldn't be easily accessible, and it shouldn't be a choice that parents make. So it's got quite a loaded history in the sense that it has implications, and for, you know, when we understand a person to become a person, you know, relates very much to that sensitive issue of abortion, that is kind of a backdrop to some of this concept and some of these ideas. But I don't really want to focus on that so much today, just to kind of give you a sense of the ways in which it's kind of been used and developed within the field of kind of sociology and related studies. But one aspect that there's been quite a bit of social research conducted around is the role of modern visual technologies, and the role that plays in this idea of fetal personhood and developing fetal personhood. And here we see studies that say that, you know, technologies like ultrasound and then becoming more sophisticated, so you can now have 3D images and 4D images, which show a growing baby, a fetus in greater depth with more quality, and it can kind of enhance some of those more human aspects. So you can see features more clearly, nose, ears, sucking thumbs, you know, those kind of images that we associate with the baby, that, you know, when a baby's born, that we can see some of those kind of within positions that of images that are taken of fetuses growing in the womb. And in this sense, they play a key role, researchers found, in helping support the bonding process with parents and to this kind of the growing child. And so just wanted to kind of pull just a few examples from here. There's different you know, companies that offer these kind of scans, but it is an industry that's grown up around and related to this idea of fetal personhood, and wanting to know our developing babies more intimately. And so you can buy different scan packages. So this is above and beyond something that you would get on the NHS, and they're often related to the idea of finding out what sex your baby is and the kind of gender. So you can see there's a gender information scan, which you can get slightly earlier if you go and pay for one of these private scans than you would if you were to find out using the NHS route. And you can see that on the right hand side of the slide, there's various different what they call added extras that are part of this process. So you can have your baby's heartbeat recorded and put that in a soft toy. You can have the image put onto keyring. So you can see how this idea of fetal personhood intersects with some of those, I say, those wider social cultural values around, you know, consumerism, and how that intersects with identity. And so what I'm trying to get at with this essentially is that what we have is a way for expectant parents, not all expectant parents, I wouldn't want to say that's the case for everybody, but often through these different ways they can be more intimately bonded with their baby before it's born, and the child has already started to be ascribed its own distinct identity and potentially place within the family. And if we think about this then in the context of early life loss and pregnancy loss, which we're talking about today, it's obviously can be quite devastating for parents when this happens. And although there might have been, you know, the fact that they have more opportunities potentially to know the child more intimately, to bond with them more, even when they're in the womb, you know, that can make those feelings of loss potentially more acute. But despite the opportunities that there are for these bonding opportunities, it still remains the case that, you know, if you have a child who particularly dies as a result of miscarriage, there's going to be far fewer material traces, so things that you can point to in the physical world that show your child or that growing life existed. And this is something that Linda Lane has written about and talked about, the limited memories of a baby because they leave behind so few material traces of social life. And, you know, whilst the parents might have quite a lot of opportunity for bonding experiences, often, if a baby's been lost early on or in pregnancy particularly, there's been very little opportunity for them to establish a social identity beyond their very immediate family, so into the wider social network, with such as stillbirths or, those kinds of losses. Often it may just be the parents that are physically seeing the child, and with a miscarriage, there may be no evidence, nothing to see at all. And so this poses what Linda Lane and others have referred to as the realness issue in the context of baby loss. So, they may feel this loss very acutely, and this then becomes challenging for them when they're seeking some acknowledgement from wider society that, their baby existed and that their loss matters. And so this can be quite a lonely experience for many parents who struggle in different ways to demonstrate that their child was real, because there are few memories, there are few material traces, and not that many people will have known the child, and certainly not in the way that they may have started to be able to bond with it. And so sociology has been interested in trying to understand these experiences for parents, and has looked at, in particular, the intersections between memories, memory making, and how we can kind of keep the memory alive of these babies and these losses, and how that intersects with this idea of personhood and developing a personhood and an identity for that child that is enduring and keeps going. And then how that then intersects with something we refer to as material culture, which basically just means material stuff and objects. And so there's been quite a lot of research that has shown that using physical objects, objects that are associated with a baby or a pregnancy, can help to attest to the realness of that life. Yeah, it can help parents who might feel that their identity as a parent is slightly ambiguous now that they don't necessarily, they may have other living children, but in relation to this particular child, this particular, pregnancy, are they still a parent? Can they make that claim? Can they have that identity? It feels ambiguous, and obviously the ambiguous identity of the child that that has died and maybe have never progressed beyond a few weeks of gestation. So realness in this context is something that the physical objects, material traces, if we can find those, is a way to help parents with this issue and with kind of making their loss feel legitimate. So bereaved parents studies have found engage in a range of memory making activities involving material objects such as photographs, blankets, and ornaments. And just to give an example from some of the research that I've done before, we interviewed a woman who had a healthy pregnancy right up until 39 weeks, so very nearly to her due date, and her baby stopped moving. She went to have some monitoring, and the hospital gave her the devastating news that there was no heartbeat and that her baby had died. And she never really found out why that had happened. And one of the ways in which she kind of managed that and create some meaning from that was to try and find ways to continue a relationship with that child. And one of the things she did is she created a shelf in her home, and she called it like a seasonal shelf. And at Christmas, she would really look forward to the opportunity of being able to go out and buy a bauble with her deceased son's initial printed on it, or to write him a Christmas card and put that on the shelf, or at autumn to maybe change the contents and make it fresh and have Halloween things on there, or autumnal plants, something that was live, it was evolving, it was material, it was physical, it was in the heart of the family home. And it was about, to some extent, it was, as the quote on the slide shows, it's a symbolic activity that helped to embed painful memories and thoughts and feelings into some kind of narrative structure. So that basically means a way to make sense of what happened, and to continue her bond with that child. And I think using sociological concepts, and that's kind of been my aim today in this kind of short talk where you can't go into a great deal of depth, but it's just been, hopefully, I've been able to show that how thinking about the broader social context in which kind of pregnancies are happening, and some of the activities and practices that go on within particular social contexts, how they reflect those wider values of society, and also how concepts of, say, fetal personhood, how they help us to understand, what it might be that motivates parents to take part in activities such as Baby Loss Awareness Week, what the significance of these things are if we have an understanding of ideas like disenfranchised grief and how, those experiences of loss that might feel hidden or not as legitimate, what that experience is like for parents. Sociological concepts and ideas help us to kind of understand that at a deeper level, I think, and shed new light on the importance of things like Baby Loss Awareness Week and, as I said, the motivations for parents to take part. And so just to kind of wrap up then in summary, I think what we've considered is we've talked about reproductive loss and said, what it is and some of the definitional issues and the experiences that it might be speaking to, but also how common it is. Yeah, so that idea that, most people will know somebody that has experienced this kind of loss, even if they don't know that that's the case, because it can often remain quite hidden. And sociology helps us, as I just said, to understand unborn babies as social objects and to give us a greater understanding, I think, of the significance of events like Baby Loss Awareness Week, in, against this context of understanding, contemporary ideas about fetal personhood, societal taboos, and issues around disenfranchised grief. And just a quick note before I end to say that if anybody's particularly interested in this kind of work, I was part of a team based at the University of Sheffield a few years ago that did a research project that was exploring some of these issues related to early life and pregnancy loss. And as part of that project, we created an exhibition, a public exhibition from the project findings, and we toured that around different parts of England. And the exhibition had an element in it where bereaved parents who attended could write a memory message on a fabric square, and that's what you can see the pictures of there on the screen. They could write their message, and then at the end of the exhibitions, we stitch them together into make a large memory quilt that is now installed in a teaching hospital in England as a kind of memorial to all those stories that we heard as part of the research and exhibition process. And so we do have, there's a website called Remembering Baby, Opening Up the Conversation. If you Google for that, you'll be able to find more information about the project and some resources as well related to baby loss. Okay, so thank you ever so much for listening. And here is a list of charities that support individuals who are dealing with issues to do with pregnancy and early life loss. So I'll just leave that slide for a moment if anybody wants to jot down the names of those. And then finally, just to kind of wrap up the talk and say, thank you for listening. This talk has been brought to you by the Division of Criminology, Policing and Society at the University of Huddersfield. So I'm a member of staff as part of that broader team, and we do have a number of undergraduate courses within our division that we're recruiting to for a September start next year. So we've got a straight sociology course, sociology with crim, and then a social science and psychology, and then our more criminology based courses. There's a straight criminology course, criminology with law, policing and investigation, and professional policing courses as well. So if you're interested in either subjects, both subjects, do give us a look up on our university webpage as a course finder, and you can find more details about the courses that we offer there. Okay, that's me. So thank you everybody for joining, and yeah, bye-bye.